actually got my mum back. I was able to take care of her and her knowing me, not a stranger like, oh, someone's coming in. It reconnected me with my mum. I'm actually someone that's important to her now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Kif halik?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay.
Thank you.
So, tell us about your mum, Sanna.
Amazing mum. Recently passed away 3 months ago, almost 3 months ago. Wow, time flies. Yeah. She'll always be remembered as a very strong woman. She went through a lot, in her life. And I think maybe that's how strong she is, that she stayed 12 years with dementia, fighting it, Yeah, she's a beautiful mum.
What is it about her childhood, her beginnings, that you think made her so tough and so resilient? Where did she start life? What just paint a picture of it?
Her life was quite hard because it was a war-torn zone in Lebanon. So, and the thing is that my dad had to come to Australia in order for us to live. So when her borders came out, he flew over, and so he'll send the money over so that we can live comfortably because there was no work, nothing. And so she had to take care of 4 girls and a little boy. She had to be quite strong because of the war. She had to protect us because it was very wild. I mean, I can remember even at 3 years old, 4 years old, people trying to get into our home.
This is what the Lebanese Civil War is.
Yeah. And it was quite, scary. And the bombs, we can hear them outside, and we had to, try and, her main goal was to protect us. Like you could feel that with my mum's protection, and especially girls. You know what I mean? In our culture, like protecting the girls is like the most important thing.
So how did your mum do that when you were a kid and you were growing up during the Lebanese Civil War? What did your mum do to protect you?
I remember waking up, and she would always be awake. Do you know what I mean? Like she would always be on the lookout.
On guard.
Yeah. When we went to get our passports on the ship to go to Cyprus, the boat was like very, very scary. And my mum, like I said, every time I open my eyes, my mum would be awake, and her hand would be on us like this, She would not let go of us. Like she would literally tie everything to us so that that she's protected us. And so that's that kind of protective thing she had. I can remember that always.
I guess there's a perception in the West of Muslim women being maybe suppressed, not very strong. But I've spent a lot of time living and working in the Middle East, and I have a slightly different
Of course,
picture
stereotype of us is just completely different.
So paint us a picture of how tough your mum was.
She was strict, but like I said to you, it's to protect us. Be strong-minded, make sure no one forces you to do anything, right? So those kind of values was in our upbringing. We're tough women. Like, we're tough, but we're also gentle. That's the thing that she taught us. So, like, we can get what we want, but in a respectable way. Unfortunately, she had a hard time in Lebanon, but she came to Australia and also had a hard time. The discrimination that we went through as a childhood, to this day, we're still having it, you know what I mean? So that made her even more stronger and more stricter with us. So I don't remember our mum being affectionate, as in, lovey-dovey, and hugging, and, she wasn't like that.
So tell me about what happened once your mum was diagnosed with dementia. Whose job was it to look after your mum?
Well, at that time, before she had the dementia, she was living with my brother and my dad, who also had dementia, and he really recently passed away. And then we noticed my mum started doing this, repeating the same thing. So it usually started with the repetition of the words. And that's when we knew. And then as soon as the diagnosis is set, family meeting, all right, You got on Monday, you got on Tuesday, you got on like we just spread the job of who's taking care of.
It's very internalised, isn't it? It's like it becomes just your problem.
That's
you
right.
Tend to push away any external support.
We didn't even know this external. We didn't. I'm talking to the community. They didn't even know that we can access these supports, and that's shocking to me.
So how did it work? Your mum was going from one family member to the next?
Yes. So we were 8, obviously. So she would go from one house to another. So can you imagine
the trauma
now
for somebody with
where's
dementia?
Where's the bathroom? But it's on the
I
left.
can't even imagine.
Yeah, so can you imagine how dementia accelerated?
Even for me now, it's just to be moving around too much is a little bit overwhelming. So for her to be in a different bathroom, different bedroom, would have been very draining.
She didn't have her own room, obviously. Certain houses had the facility for her own room, but others no. She had to share with grandkids. Can you imagine that kind of...
That woman's been through so much.
So, like, we feel guilty now. I feel guilty now that we know this training, and that's why I really am passionate to empower my community to seek these services early on.
Can you describe what impact that had on her, all that moving from one family member to the next?
Oh, it accelerated her dementia. From now, my train, I know what was happening. She was going crazy, literally, because she'll suddenly go loud and violent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we wouldn't know, like, what did we do? What did we do?
Something triggered her.
Something triggered her. And obviously, like, when we look at, my house has got brick and brack everywhere, and it's got the cultural, different kind of patterns everywhere. So obviously she was not in the right environment. And she was living that environment.
Explain that. What's the issue with the patterns and the different shapes and everything?
Because in dementia, like, already her brain is in turmoil, right? And then she's trying the pattern of the Turkish carpet, right? That would have been so struggling to try to put the patterns in the right place. You know what I mean?
That would have been mentally difficult.
Mentally difficult to her, but we weren't seeing that. We were seeing her getting angrier and getting violent.
Because you don't understand what's behind.
Because we didn't know what's behind of her. Yeah, until I got that training, and I said, we should get rid of the renter from her home, clear out the whole house, no furniture except simple, like a bed, in her room, and a simple lounge. That's it, very simple stuff, and put her in. The day my mum walked into her home, it was like she came back. Like, literally, my mum came back.
Sort of a sigh of relief.
Yeah. And then she worked, and she goes, "Where's my birds?" Like, she knew, because she's got Rosella birds all our life. She was raising them, basically. She was in the wild birds.
What are Rosella birds?
Rosella's wild birds would come and feed.
You know the birds on the biscuit tins?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
That's
arnets.
a Rosella.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's new learn for the day.
She was like... And they came, like, I'm not kidding you. It was the beautiful sight. And they just came and sat on her hand.
It's like they knew.
Yeah,
She's back home.
Well, I'm not kidding. It was just so beautiful. And she goes, "This is my house." She knew where the bathroom is straight away. And this is like a couple of years she hasn't been there.
So what had happened to your relationship with your mum during this time? Because I know you're married to a Palestinian.
Yes.
And the Arabic accents are a little bit different.
Yes.
The Lebanese accent is pretty distinct. You use some different words. Is it shufi mafi?
Yeah. Even the word in Lebanese we'll say eh.
Yeah.
Instead of, like, eh, right, yeah. I'll say In Palestinian we'll say
So what did this do for your mum?
She literally deleted me as her daughter, like every time it was my turn to come to my mum, she goes, "You're not my daughter, and you're not, who are you? And go away, and it was really hard. That's like...
That would have been heartbreaking for
you. It
you.
was. Because, you see, we share videos constantly of our mum, and I can see how she talks to my sisters and brothers.
Warm.
Yeah. Sometimes there was not warm. She's still a tough woman. I won't go into detail, but there was still that affection, She would allow them to hug them, I didn't get that.
You weren't allowed to hug your mum?
No, she wouldn't let me hug her. She wouldn't let me kiss her.
So you were trying to do things like bathe her, change her clothes, feed your mum.
Yes, with the fight all the time.
Yeah, so how did she react?
I'd come out with bruises every time I come from my mum because she didn't not like me to touch her.
It must be very confronting when you get to that stage where you have to be in control and start caring to the degree where you're bathing, feeding.
That's
and
right.
especially if there's resistance, that must be very hard to go through.
Very hard. It was very depressing to see that, you see, because my mindset is, what can I do for my mum? Because this is the time where we can get all these rewards for being good to our parents. This is payback, you know what I mean? Like, we feel that we say this is time to take care of her because she took care of us. And that concept of our culture saying it's your responsibility when they grow up, right? But Islamically is, no, seek, the first word in our Quran is iqra, which means read, right? Which means knowledge. So we're supposed to educate ourselves with the condition that we're dealing with. I mean, I don't know anything about dementia.
No, it's like the mystery disease that's behind the curtain.
Yeah.
This is why this podcast is so great, because it really does give a lot of people insight.
So when someone says cancer, everyone knows, they'll go and look up, which cancer does my mum have, and they'll get an ID. But as soon as dementia, they won't seek it. They'll say, it's just part of growing old.
It's so stigmatised still, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's considered as,
it's normal. It's considered normal.
But so tell me what you did about that, because you've mentioned going to a workshop.
What was it?
What did you learn, and what difference did that make?
That was like the most amazing experience I've had, and that was 3 years before she died. So 3 years previously was those 3 years where I didn't have my mum, right? She didn't acknowledge me.
She wasn't dealing with you as her daughter.
I was like taking care of her from a distant kind of, She'll have her moments, don't get me wrong, but it was not enough. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I found a workshop in Lakemba, so it's all supposed to be for the Muslim community, and I was the only one that turned up.
Right.
Yeah.
This was a Dementia Australia workshop?
Dementia Australia, Friends United with Dr. Diana, and so I had her all to myself. So I said to her, listen, Diana, look, I've got this issue with my mum. I was hoping you can give me some tips. And I said, I can't even greet her, She goes, look, think of a way that your mum remembers you by when you were little. And then because every person in your family has to greet her in a different way for her to recognise that person on a constant level. And that's where I knew that the carer always greeted her in the same way.
So what did you do?
So I loved dancing. So when I was little, she'd always put, music was always there in the background there. So she'll put the music on and she'll say dance. So I'll dance for her when I was little.
How old would you have been?
I was dancing since I was 1. So I love dancing, and I thought that's the only connection that she knows that about me. Out of all of, my family, I love dancing, and she knows that. So I said, okay, we'll try it. So I put the music. I chose an older song that she would remember in those times.
Okay.
And I walked in dancing to her, and she looked up straight away, and she said, Sanna? And she, it was like, she said my name.
Wow. So as though they
it's like
information
click,
out.
Click, yeah. And she said, Sanna? And she actually got emotional. She actually said, I love you. Like straight away, she goes, Habibi, Pali. And she's called me over.
As though you've been somewhere for a while.
It's as if that, where have you been? I haven't seen you in a while.
What a massive breakthrough.
Yeah, I know. And she hugged me and she kissed me. And she said, Allah yarda alayki. And the words of Islamic dua, prayer is so important to us. And I never had that for a long time.
What did having or re-establishing that connection with your mum mean for you?
I actually got my mum back. I was able to take care of her and her knowing me, not a stranger, like, someone's coming in. It reconnected me with my mum, like I'm now a daughter again. I'm not a stranger. Do you know what I mean? I'm actually someone that's important to her now.
There's such a feeling of reward when it is a loved one, and when that barrier's there and you can't get to that loved one because they don't know it's you. It changes the dynamic. But to actually get her back, and that's why I think so many people don't realise going to somewhere like Dementia Australia to get educated about these tips and things you can instill in the way that you care makes so much difference.
I know. A small tip.
You're a living example of that.
Yeah, it was just a small tip that she gave me, worked wonders, and especially even the colours. So every time I went to her house, I would only be in plain colours. So I wouldn't have those days where she'll scream and run, like she'll get loud and talking 100. No, I'd have a very calm time with my mum. I knew what was happening, so I made sure that there's no clothes that was patterned. The mat that was anything that's in the house, we actually cleared everything up because I told my sisters and that. So we did everything they recommended for her home to be, clutter-free and all that.
Calm.
So it was a calming, where we had her calming. Whenever, let's go to the backyard. That's her area.
You've talked about this a little bit today, but when I first met you, when we launched the first season of Hold the Moment, you came and chatted to me and you said, look, it's really important that you explore what this means for different cultures, different backgrounds.
That's right.
And they say that no one dementia story or journey is the same as any other.
Yeah.
But why is it so important that we think about and talk about the different ways that different cultures are maybe coming at a challenge like this?
Because the different cultures, even like Chinese and the Vietnamese and the Greeks, like I've got the chemist, he's Greek, and they are adamant are not getting outside help, the patient.
Why is that resistance there?
Because I still bring it back to they grew up saying, we took care of you when we were little, it's now your time to take care of us when we're old. Do you know what I mean? I think that is very strong to the culture in all of those cultures. When we were raising you, we didn't go and get any help. But and then, hang on a minute, they did have help. They had the aunties, they had the grandmothers. We had that social interaction there.
Very
we had
those, network.
we had a lot of family, and that is part of the support.
But do you have some regret that as a family you hadn't learned all this stuff earlier? Because it was your mum lived with dementia for 12 years, I think.
I think the last 3 or so that we...
Yeah, so this happened really towards the end that you adapted.
I mean, there's Carer Gateway has, as soon as you diagnose, basically this, like a retreat. Like that would have been amazing to be on that retreat where they take the dementia patient and then they teach her or him and then they take me and the carer and they go, look, this is what it's going to come up. Look, prepare yourself. Instead of like having 3 years of not knowing where my mum is, you know what I mean, and not acknowledging me. So that's what I'm saying, that if we get early intervention earlier, it would be, that journey would be not so stressful.
You could have
for
given
both.
your mum a better existence.
Yeah, for both of us, not just us, not just for the carer and her.
Sanna, shukran jazeelan.
Thank you, Yaakov.
Thank you so much.
It's
A pleasure to listen to.
Thank you.
Jim, in Arabic, shukran.
Shukran.
He knows all this one.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hold the Moment is a podcast from Dementia Australia, produced by Dead Set Studios.